And this is where I think the risk fundamentally differs between traditional and commercial supply chains and more direct supply chains. You have fewer actors, you hold more risk, but it's a transparency. When you have that transparency, that open flow of information, quicker flows of information, communication, again, I think I mentioned it in a previous episode, but you can make plans and you can get information sooner so you know when a problem's arising so you can address it together. And you can have multiple contingency plans, and you can also have plans for if it does go wrong, how are we going to handle this? How are we going to share this burden so we can continue to grow together? And I think that in itself is a form of risk management. I think just the inherent aspects of direct trade, responsible direct trade, let's add responsible in there, can mitigate risk if done properly.
At Mapple Forward, we work with coffee businesses around the world, from startups to established brands, helping to make sure they build, grow, and thrive. Whether you're a first-time business owner looking to understand the blueprint of what's really involved in building a successful coffee company, or you're an established business needing a strategic plan, supply chain solution, or go-to-market strategy, we have a vast global network and we can help. We don't work on commission. We work on transparent fees, and our consulting comes with a 100% money back guarantee. We're your partner conspiring to your success, and your success is our success. Learn more or start your journey with us by connecting via the contact page on our website or emailing us at support@mapperforward.org. You can see all the details in the show notes. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 3 of an awesome discussion with Matthew Thornton from Arkena Coffee Market in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. We are talking about responsible direct trade coffee relationships. Emphasis on responsible. In this episode, we're going to talk about risk distribution and directly, and particularly how that impacts direct trade relationships compared to the traditional supply chain relationships. And for those who don't know what we're talking about with regards to risk, Matthew, why don't you help them understand what are the different exposures that stakeholders, and let's start maybe with the farmers, what are the risks that farmers are exposed to with regards to anything, whether it's traditional or direct trade relationships?
Oh, and I think it's not even just farmers. I think everyone's exposed to similar risks. And I think for time's sake, they're exposed to similar risks. So if we put like boundary around it, and let's just say it's for the actual trade of coffee, it's moving around.
Right.
Not to say they're mutually exclusive. Yeah, let's just get into it. But when you really think about coffee, there's the actual physical attributes of the coffee that have risk. It could be quality, it could be price, it could be quantities that can't be met, or maybe you produce more than you can sell. These are risks. You also may have operational risks, like logistics risks, delays. Did I mention financial risks, similar to like payment disbursements, access to loans, access to capital? These are all risks that do impact the coffee trade in some way. And when you look at commercials, like commercial tools, we have developed risk tools. One of them being like futures contracts. It's where a buyer and a seller get together and they agree to buy a specific quantity of coffee with Y quality at X price for time Z in the future. And how does this reduce risk in traditional supply chains? Well, sellers, the farmers or the producers, know that there's a market and they know the price. And then they can turn their attention to the beginning of the supply chain and focus on operations and getting that coffee ready. On the flip side, the buyer can expect that a coffee for a certain price and a certain quality is coming in at this time. So they can focus on the other side of the supply chain and be like, let's get whatever happens after this ready to go. Creates reassurances in the supply chain. But I would argue that, these risks Oh man. In today's coffee market, I don't even know. Is anyone doing futures contracts anymore? It's so volatile. I think it would be crazy to almost go into it for either party.
Well,
Have you
and you raised
seen
something
much?
really interesting there, because the first part of what you're saying is like the futures market helps because it gives everybody clarity. Everybody knows what they're involved in. Everybody knows what they're up for. People know the price. People know when it's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. But that clarity is also creating volatility, and that volatility isn't serving anybody.
Yeah,
And it's
and I wouldn't say
increasing
that
risk for
applies to
everybody.
futures markets. Futures markets, I
Right.
think
In
there are
general.
people in there.
Yeah.
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 It's the idea of futures contracts is supposed to be like a risk alleviation tool. But
Right.
in the current coffee economy that's being tested, and really, it's probably it's probably no longer valid really in a lot of circumstances. Um, so then what if you really boil down risk? It's you have risk when you're holding it. If I have the coffee, I have the risk. The price changes, the quality gets impacted. I'm the one that owns it. I'm the one that's holding it. I'm responsible. And if we look at really long, probably traditional commercial supply chains, there's a lot of people in there, and everyone kind of spreads out that risk. I don't have to hold it for as long before it moves out of my hands. The chance of the price or quality problems arising is less. In these supply chains, though, there's not as much transparency. So the risk, although more distributed, it can be focused on specific entities like exporters. Maybe there's risk of due diligence with the now again delayed EUDR. If it ever comes about,
If it ever happens.
they are at risk if they can't prove where their coffee's coming from and it's deforestation free. They may be blocked out of markets. And then buyers along that same train of thought, if they're sourcing from an exporter who's claiming this, they fail to claim it, maybe purchasing that coffee, that's not a risk, but they probably have matching contracts to other people, buyers, that now they're struggling to meet because they got to find coffee that actually is EUDR verified. So there is a bit of shifting of risk, but you don't hold it for as long. And this is where I think the risk fundamentally differs between traditional and commercial supply chains and more direct supply chains. You have fewer actors, you hold more risk, but it's a transparency. When you have that transparency, that open flow of information, quicker flows of information, communication, again, I think I mentioned it in a previous episode, but you can make plans and you can get information sooner so you know when a problem's arising so you can address it together. And you can have multiple contingency plans, and you can also have plans for if it does go wrong, how are we going to handle this? How are we going to share this burden so we can continue to grow together? And I think that in itself is a form of risk management. I think just the inherent aspects of direct trade, responsible direct trade, let's add responsible in there, can mitigate risk if done properly.
One of the I often ask roasters, like, first of all, when I'm working, they want to work with Mapper Forward to help them figure out either a strategic plan or, how to solve some of their supply chain issues. The first question I ask them is, what is your buying philosophy? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, we need to understand what are the parameters around how you buy coffee. And they're like, I don't really have one. Okay. Have you thought of direct trade? I'd love to do direct trade. Why don't you do direct trade? Because I can't afford to carry all of that risk all at once. And that's really at the heart of the problem. The barrier to entry for direct relationships is that people get stopped dead in their track the moment they have to start to consider the risk that they are putting forward. And I would argue, folks, if this is where you're going, because where that conversation typically goes for me and potential clients or people who are clients is, how much are you spending on branding? How much are you spending on marketing? How much are you spending in all of these other parts of your business? And what risk are you connecting to that. Because when you look at marketing, there is no guarantee that the branding and the marketing that you're using is going to give you an ROI that is any better than investing in your supply chain. And we as an industry have to get back to putting the risk in the right places so that we can grow up and build better businesses. And this isn't going to work for everybody. But the reason I wanted, and we're going to focus a lot on direct trade in 2026. That's going to be the theme of Map It Forward. Our focus is going to be on how do we help the industry solve these problems of creating better direct trade. Why? And it was inspired by Matthew approaching me and Marianella, who's going to be on the podcast, having this conversation with me. The reason is because if we are going to make it out of this coffee crisis, we have to make it out of this coffee crisis with stronger relationships in our industry, stronger relationships that will survive any earthquake that heads there, or have at least a better chance to survive this earthquake. And understanding risk is such a fucking important part of your business that if you keep avoiding it, it's not going to solve itself. But you're putting the risk in the parts of your business by hiring content strategists for social media, expecting them to have an ROI for you, and them showing up with nothing other than more followers that you actually can't take to the bank. But if you invested that money in your supply chain and in your partnerships at the beginning part of your business, I wonder where that would lead. What are your thoughts on that, Matthew?
Oh, man. Working in the middle has given me kind of insights into both sides of the supply chain. And I think
I imagine
when it comes down to risk, honestly, buyers make me more nervous than farmers. Farmers, like, they get it. They're like, "Yep, we got this, no problem." Buyers, like, there is risk. I do think they should think about investing in supply chains. But I don't want to sound too preachy, like I'm going to buy coffee direct through Arkena. I think it's just an important thing. I mean, just like you're mentioning, if you're going to invest in marketing, why are you not investing in your supply chain where you're actually producing the products that you're selling? I think the trade could also reduce risk in some way, or at least create additional value because it brings up USPs for your business. Everything I read about, again, I'm not directly exposed to it, but it sounds like it's a hyper competitive market, and anything you can do to set yourself apart.
Nuts.
Yeah, anything you can do, like having direct relationships, having relationships with farmers, like anything that will set you apart seems extremely valuable. And I think there's change coming about where people are allergic to the bullshit and they can smell it from a mile away. And you're smart to invest now, because if you don't see that as risk, I think you're missing some things. So yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is that when you're investing in your marketing before you're investing in your supply chain, or you're investing more in one than the other, here's the trap that you end up falling into, especially in the moment that we're in right now. When you invest in your marketing, and we're seeing this everywhere, by the way, and you have built a business off prices that are a lot cheaper than they are today, and you have an influx of customers that come into your business, if you don't have a supply chain strategy that can support that growth in a moment of volatility that we are in 2025 and will be in 2026, in my opinion, if you can't service that growth with product and confidence, you just fucked yourself. And that's why it's important to have secure supply chains. And right now,
100%.
when I'm speaking to importers, a lot of them are telling me that they're up shit creek without a paddle because they can't get coffee. And so
Importers can't get coffee. What kind of coffees are they sourcing? What ones do they?
Well,
get the more
from
specialty,
all
or is
over
it
the
more?
world. the problem is that a lot of the coffee that used to be bought spot is now forward contracted. So as soon as the coffee shows up on the radar of people who have these huge, big businesses, they're hoovering up everything that they can. And so a lot of smaller businesses and medium-sized businesses, they just can't get the access that they used to before for anywhere close to the financials that they had before, right? So now they're exposed.
Yeah.
And so now what we have is that importers can't service the market the way that they used to.
Yeah. You just gave me a new business idea. A new feature to build up to the platforms.
Well, and this is why, I have I released this walk and talk video yesterday on social media about who should open a coffee business right now. And because a lot of people are saying to me, should I open a cafe? Should I open a roastery? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm constantly saying, listen, guys, if you can solve a problem in the coffee industry right now and you can find a way to monetize the solution, and you can find a way to do that at a way that is affordable for everybody. There are so many problems that need to be fixed right now in coffee. There is opportunities everywhere. But the problem is that people are doing the same fucking thing that everybody else is doing. Right? If you want to reduce the risk in your business, do something that nobody else is doing. Don't just do a different color of what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
So right, and this is why
foundation, right? To build it on a sound foundation.
And you've got to and be agile and be adaptive, and constantly the cycle of products and product viability is wild these days. People's attention spans are shifting and they're changing, and that is another form of risk, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, coming back to what we're talking about with regards to the risk distribution, how does direct trade, so what fair risk distribution looks like to me is the opposite of what we have right now. Risk distribution is that the farmer invests in growing the coffee, they fund all the inputs, and they have to make a decision based on what's happening on the commercial market of do they sell it to the commercial market or do they invest in selling it to an exporter who is going to pay them whenever they're going to pay them, right? Some exporters that are doing the right thing will pay right at the time that they buy the coffee. Others are not going to pay it until they've sold it. So there's a lot of complications there. And in that scenario, the farmer is carrying a lot of the risk, pretty much all of the risk. And in other situations, what they end up doing is saying, I'm going to do direct trade, but I'm going to do direct trade in specialty coffee. And what ends up happening is that right now, what we're seeing is that they find that relationship. And then the roaster says, or the importer or the buyer turns around and says, I will pay you in installments. So I'm going to wait for you to harvest the coffee. I'm going to let you ship me the coffee. I'm going to have it sitting in my warehouse and then I'm going to pay you in installments. Now, that doesn't seem like it's mitigating the risk either, right? And this is where direct trade has not worked for people because they're doing shitty direct trade. And this is why we talked about responsible direct trade relationships, because risk, a balanced mitigation of risk, or not even mitigation of risk, which is like making sure we don't have any risk. We want to make sure that the risk that's being shared, being experienced in that relationship is balanced, right? So what in your mind, how does risk get involved there with a responsible direct trade relationship?
Well, I think there's a caveat to what you just said. I would say if they're paying in installments, that just sounds like a headache for the farmer. But the farmer has their own free will and they have their own businesses. And if they agree to it and it's okay for them, I think it's fine. The problem is if they get forced into it just because they have to be taking a contract. They're trying to move coffee. Um, what was the, I got distracted. What was the question again?
I'm sure you've got 15 conversations going on in your head at the same time.
Yeah.
But what I want to understand, and I think what people listening want to understand is, if we do have a responsible direct trade relationship, right? What does risk look like when it's even in that relationship?
Oh man, that's when I would say farmers and buyers are coming to agreements on not only quality and just basic contract structures, but also mitigation plans. And they're varied. Just like the coffee industry, I can't say it's black and white. This is what mitigation looks like for you. It depends on the farmer's experience. It depends on the buyer's experience and their capacities. But it really comes down to having agreed upon mitigation plans where one party is not strong-handed into it. They have to come to an even playing field and have a clear understanding. And I wish I could sit here and be like, yeah, it's X, Y, and Z. It's just too complicated. What works for one person doesn't work for another on both sides of the supply chain. But I think it comes down just to agreed upon mitigation strategies. And also,
And understanding what the risk is in the first place, right? Like
yes,
knowing
100%.
that things aren't going to go perfect. And when they don't go perfect, what's the risk that we're willing to bear with regards to that?
Exactly. And what happens? I mean, there's instances where risk can be completely mitigated. For example, we try and help farmers. Like, it doesn't happen often, but we have had, a lot rejected. But we've set up structures here locally where there's other exporters that are looking for these coffees, and they buy them up for good prices from farmers. So there is some contingency there. Is it perfect? No, I don't know if anything is, but it is one plan. It really does come down to understanding, coming to agreement on even playing fields. Without that, it's not even direct trade. I mean,
You can't build trust.
You can't build trust. I would also say, depending on the experience of the people, this is where third parties can really get involved and help come up with solutions. Like the thing you were bringing up before, where like importer is paying farmers in installments. It sounds like the importer doesn't have enough cash to actually pay for it right off the bat.
Yeah.
So why isn't there like a financial tool where you're going to take a little more risk in interest, and you're going to release that money to farmer at one payment at one time, so they're not stuck in a cycle of poverty because of your inability to buy it and overstretching yourself. This is where like these intermediaries can offer viable risk mitigation tools. Yeah.
Any new relationship, it's like having a therapist that's there helping people learn how to build that relationship in a responsible kind of way. Not that you're a therapist, but you are a kind of matchmaker, right? And as being that matchmaker, you helping anyone who's engaging in direct relationships needs to understand what the risks that they're taking on and what the risk that their producing partner is taking on, or their buying partner is taking on. And if neither of those two parties have ever done this before, that's where we end up with irresponsible direct trade relationships, because then people are trying to figure out, like, can I maybe get one over here and be even more extractionist? Maybe they're not that obvious in it, but they're thinking like, well, I don't know, I'm going to suggest maybe if this guy can take it in installments, I'm going to pay in installments rather than paying all that way up front. I'm going to save money on financing. He'll eventually get his money, but it doesn't work that way. Let's say that producer is trying to establish. It's not a beauty at all.
He
it's
needs
not
to
a
invest
mutual
in his
benefit.
operations. You can't do it.
It's imperialist, it's extractionist, it continues all of the things we're trying to stop in coffee. You've got to take responsibility for building your fucking business and building it the right way. It's not the farmer's responsibility that you should have to take on board extra financing costs.
Yeah.
It means you having a conversation, but it's also not the farmer's responsibility it's not your responsibility to make sure that everything that the farmer is doing on his farm is the way it needs to be done. That's the farmer's job.
Yeah.
So he or she, they are going to take care of their business. You're going to take care of your business. And over time, as you can demonstrate to each other that you're showing up for each other and building this trust, you don't need an intermediary. You don't need anybody showing you that this is the right way, right? Like the whole point. Go ahead.
No, you nailed it. Like what you just said it's exactly like what we believe at Arkena. And it doesn't happen overnight. This takes time.
Yeah.
But the shared responsibility, we really do hammer it in buyers' heads and farmers' heads. Like we're going out to the fields very soon, and it's like, if you're going to do this, you are taking on extra responsibilities, but there's a benefit to it. And if you want to grow, like it's just a necessity. You have to take more responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But same with buyers. And I think there's a willingness to take that. I mean, if the reward is there, for sure. But it's also not overnight. Yeah, it takes time. Yes.
So
it takes time to get there too.
Not only does it take time to get there, it takes a decent amount of grace for yourself to understand that you don't know what's happening and there's a whole bunch of new stuff involved in this. And folks, this coffee crisis is offering us the opportunity to think about how we can do things differently and learn to do things in a way that we perhaps didn't do them before. Take the opportunity. If you want to survive this coffee crisis, and I think, in my opinion, we are coming up to that point where we are going to start to see businesses close. If you want to be one of those businesses that is going to survive all of that, and so far you've done everything right, the way to adapt is to think about the way that you're approaching being a responsible participant with your supply chain partners. Right now is the time to do that. Yep. So in our next episode of this series, we're going to talk about technology and how it's changing the way that coffee is being traded. There's a lot in here, and it's not just about Arkena. This is about social media. It's about the C market. It's about trading apps, blah, 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 blah. So join us for the fourth episode of this series. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.